I appreciate your comments on healthcare, that you're trying to find this middle to move forward. And I know you just also, in terms of honoring the memory of Senator McCain, just introduced an important resolution.
We did, yes. We introduced a resolution with Senator Sinema and also Senator Graham, Senator Warren. There may have been one other on there. It was a resolution related to Glioblastoma Awareness. This is such a deadly disease. It took the life of our dear Senator McCain, also Senator Kennedy. And when I visited the Ivy Brain Tumor Center right here at the Barrow Neurological Center, they talked about how 30 years of investment in really trying to find a difference that could extend the lives or find a cure, and really there's been little impactful outcome. And right here in Phoenix, you guys should be proud that the Ivy Brain Tumor Center is right here, really breaking barriers and making a difference. And then our resolution is just to simply raise awareness of this and to honor those who are suffering from this awful disease.
Thank you for doing that. They put my brain back together. It was a less serious problem, I think. But on the border, you have been working for many, many years to streamline the process to make it easier for particularly veterans to serve at our ports of entry. Can you talk a little bit about the latest on that area?
Absolutely. In fact, my first bill signed into law when I was a member of the House was the Border Jobs for Veterans Act, and it was specifically streamlining the process for our veterans to get jobs at the ports of entry, the blue suiters, the ones that are responsible, as Senator Sinema was talking about, for the legitimate commerce, but also stopping the bad stuff that's coming through the ports of entry. At the time that I was first in the House, it was taking like a year and a half for them to go through this multi-step process. How many people here can wait a year and a half for a job? That's ridiculous. So what's happening is we were losing these veterans coming out of service who already have security clearances, have already been vetted, because they were going to other opportunities. And so streamlining that process for them was the first thing we were able to get into law, but we still have real challenges. So last session in the House, I got a bill out of the House. This session, I'm working with Dan Crenshaw to partner on it, that allows them to also continue to streamline for those who came from other law enforcement and veterans who have already been vetted, already gone through background checks, so they're not waiting and being tripped up on a case-by-case basis related to the polygraph requirement. Just giving a little more flexibility for them to quickly be able to bring these people who have already showed they can be trusted, have put their lives on the line. And so we're moving that forward, and it was a very bipartisan bill in the past. And as Senator Sinema mentioned, in your questioning, the two of us sent a letter as they were saying they were going to move individuals from the ports of entry to address this border crisis. I understand our border agents are overwhelmed. I mean, I'm down there all the time. I see it. But we've got to figure out a better way than moving agents from another key critical part of border security at the ports of entry that also would hurt our economy in order to address that issue.
And Senator, I need to say, when I've been at the ports, San Luis and Nogales, they also mentioned you're there, your teams are there, you're on a daily basis really trying to reduce those wait times and solve a problem.
Yeah, another big thing about the ports of entry, look, our infrastructure at these ports of entry needs to be updated. The Douglas Port of Entry was built in 1933. And so I put a lot of pressure on the administration when I first got to Congress that it needs to be modernized. We were able to get a feasibility study funded to take a look at what needs to happen. The San Luis Port of Entry also is on the list to be modernized, and the DeConcini Port is next on the list. I was really glad, and I may be getting ahead of ourselves, but I was invited to the White House last week as they were talking about what you may have seen yesterday, the president rolling out a modernization of the legal immigration system. But as part of that conversation, they're including funding for the land ports of entry. This is something that I've been advocating for a very long time, during the government shutdown even, trying to find common ground with Democrats and Republicans. Funding these ports of entries, the infrastructure projects for these are so critical, and it was actually included in the president's proposal, and so it's great to see that they're listening. Do you know these are funded under GSA, which is the same organization that funds federal office buildings? And so somehow they're rack and stacked every year for office buildings. These are our ports of entry. So we've got to get these modernized, and I'm glad to see that that was in the proposal, and we got to fight to get that funding.
Well, you've been working very hard on this, and getting back to the Arizona-Mexico Commission, I believe Luis Ramirez is here, and he's been working very hard on the funding for San Luis. Luis, Luis knows his stuff, and he really this is a huge deal for the state. Sticking on trade, maybe we'll start with China. How you see that situation moving forward, and then we'll get a little bit closer to this hemisphere.
Well, let me say, I've been, as someone who's in the military, I mean, we've been watching the rise of China for a very long time, and I think when the Berlin Wall came down and the collapse of the Soviet Union, we have sort of been celebrating that we were in a period of relative peace, despite the counterterrorism operations that we had to do, while China was continuing to play the long game of how they were going to compete with us on many fronts, not just economically, but also militarily. They've been building islands where they didn't exist before in the South China Sea and then militarizing them. They have been, through their access in the World Trade Organization, basically cheating for all these years, whether it's subsidizing their companies, right? Whether it's hacking in order to get access to our technology that is our innovation, or even legally, if you want to do business over there, they do forced, technology transfers with their joint ventures. So this is ridiculous. It's been going on for a long time, and in many areas, they are now catching up, and in some areas, they are surpassing us. And I appreciate the administration trying to take them on. I would hope that our allies could sign to join the team so that we can continue to crank up the pressure on them. This is a national security threat for sure, and that is very much my focus. Look, I'm a free and fair trader at heart. So I'm not, I don't support tariffs. I don't think tariffs are a good plan for us to be addressing these issues. But we're trying to give some negotiating space. We were hoping for a breakthrough in the last few weeks. It looks like China reneged on some of the things that they had previously agreed to. And I meet with people all the time who are being impacted by these tariffs. In fact, I was talking to the president about this today about the impact that it's having in our communities, and particularly, across the board, but on some of our farmers. Even when they provided agricultural relief, it was to soybeans and others, but it wasn't to some of the other commodities that we have here in Arizona, whether it's beef or tree nuts or alfalfa or cotton. These are being impacted as well. So I'm engaging with the administration that, hey, not the way to deal with this, but if you're going to provide any additional relief, can't you include some of these other assets so we can minimize the impact as they hopefully are able to get a breakthrough soon, because this is really important for our economy. Obviously, the economy is doing well, but I hope we can have a breakthrough. And I'm concerned, China plays the long game, and they're not as responsible or accountable to their people as we are here, and so they won't necessarily feel the pressure even if they're suffering. So we got to use all elements of our national power, working with our allies in order to keep the pressure cranked up on them, and hopefully we'll get a breakthrough soon.
In terms of working with our allies, USMCA, and there are some tariffs that have been levied. We heard a little bit about that on Mexico and Canada. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that agreement and what we need to do to build alliances with our friends,
yes.
Canada and Mexico?
Let me first say I fully support passing USMCA. We got to get that across the finish line as soon as possible. It has to start in the House. So I am encouraging all the Democrats and Republicans in the House to urge Nancy Pelosi to bring that up for a vote. I believe it was brought up today, it would pass. Thank you. Let's keep it going. I was talking to President Trump about this on the phone today, the importance of this to our economy here in Arizona. As you know, it's over 200,000 jobs, tremendous updates and modernization that needed to happen in NAFTA that are in that agreement. We have had some concern about the steel and aluminum tariffs with Mexico and Canada while we're trying to get USMCA done. I thought I was going to announce the breaking news, but I guess it happened. But I was talking with the president about it earlier before it popped, that they were going to announce the relief or an agreement related to the steel and aluminum tariffs. I think this removes a significant barrier for us to get it through the Senate, but we just need politics to stop being played with this. I really believe if it came up today, it would be passed. But there's this challenge, as you know, it's Washington, D.C., right? They don't want to give President Trump a win. But this isn't about President Trump. This is about the American people. This is about the people that we represent. So we got to keep the pressure going on. Bring it up for a vote. Let's get it on his desk, and let's get it finished.
Amen. And who wouldn't be nervous talking to two tremendous United States senators? So I haven't had anything to eat in a while. My favorite food is tomatoes.
Tomatoes.
And I know you've been working hard. Can you talk a little bit about the suspension agreement and where all that could go?
Yes. So I bet most people in the audience don't know what the suspension agreement is. So I'm going to get a little wonky here for a second, okay? So back in 1996, there was an anti-dumping case against Mexico related to the importation of tomatoes. And as part of one of the tools that they can have during these cases, they actually can come up with an agreement which includes those parties involved in the U.S. and others that suspends the case, basically, and allows an agreement to kind of stabilize the cost. Now, this isn't about us fighting with Mexico when it comes to Arizona, because we import a lot of the fresh produce from Mexico, and it creates jobs in Arizona, because obviously there's different seasons, and we've got strengths and weaknesses in different areas, and so we have a tremendous number of jobs in Arizona that are about the logistical hub of the importation of these fruits and vegetables. So 1996, they basically suspended the case against the tomato importation, and things have been steady since then. But because this isn't about us versus Mexico, it's about us versus Florida, just to be frank. Because there are some growers in Florida, and the way that they were approaching it, Department of Commerce announced they were pulling out of the suspension agreement, and that actually went into effect on May 7th. So what that means is the anti-dumping case and investigation is no longer suspended. So the Department of Commerce is now continuing on their anti-dumping case. Here's something that I learned actually in studying kind of for the way forward. It's not common to have a suspension agreement. Of the 475 anti-dumping and countervailing tariff cases that Commerce has, there's only 8 suspension agreements. So it's very critical that all parties involved, if we're going to get another agreement, because this could jack up the prices of tomatoes at our dinner table and in our stores, okay? So ASU did a study recently about the impact that this is going to have. So this is about American jobs. It's about American consumers, right? So we're engaging with the Department of Commerce on this, about the importance of them moving forward to either get another suspension agreement or to finalize this based on current information, because we want to do it in a way that doesn't hurt our consumers and our jobs. The deadline for that right now is September 19th. If they're not able to get another suspension agreement by then the duties will go into effect should the case close and then they find some negative finding towards Mexico. So, is anybody still awake? All right, sorry, it's a little wonky.
No,
not everything we talk about in D.C. is like, oh, what's on cable television. But these are really important issues, and just know we're engaged on them, and we know how important they are for us, and we're going to keep an eye on it, keep the pressure on.
It could be about 30,000 jobs, and I can confirm, as someone who does the shopping at Trader Joe's, the price of tomatoes have already gone up with the tariffs.
Yes,
this
see,
is serious stuff.
Yeah. So they're already collecting tariffs, but should they come to a positive resolution, those will be refunded to the companies, because it's not until they finish the case that they actually would go into effect. Anyway, we gotta make sure that we resolve that as quickly as possible.
My final question is a very serious note, and you serve on the Senate Armed Services, as did Senator McCain. You have come out in the most courageous way on the issue of sexual assault and sexual harassment. And I know that you have been working this issue very hard and have legislation. If you could maybe talk about that issue and how we could all help as well.
Thanks, Glenn. I never would have imagined, actually, when I was appointed to the Senate, that I would be leading on this issue, just to be frank. But sometimes life just puts a mantle on you, and you just got to step up and lead because of the positions that you're in and the things that you've been through. So you may have seen that I did share in a hearing on March 6th that I also am a survivor of military sexual assault. Look, the reality is 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men, according to the CDC, in their lifetime will be victims of sexual assault. So this is something that is prevalent in our society, and it's got to stop. And we expect more of our military. When you join the military, America's mothers and fathers send their sons and daughters off. You know, we're willing to put our lives on the line for our country, but you got to make sure that you're going to be safe and you're not going to have crimes committed to you by another person in uniform. Thank you. I mean, this is not just a criminal issue, it's a leadership issue, and it's a readiness issue. And the numbers came out recently, it's still too high. Too many people have been through what I've been through, and I'm very passionate about stopping it. There are some people out there that think the way to fix it is to strip commanders of the decision as to what to do once the information on an investigation is given to them as to whether to go to court-martial or not. I strongly disagree with that, not just as a former commander, but also as a survivor, and I don't take that position lightly. So what I set into doing over the last 2 months wasn't in part of our plan, but here we are, is I directed the Pentagon to get to work on a task force and start to look at, from the moment, instead of stripping commanders from the decision, from the moment somebody reports an assault happens till the end of the judicial process, we can't accept the status quo. What else needs to improve to have timely, thorough investigations that are not mutually exclusive, so there's the best possible opportunity for justice while protecting due process for the accused, which is fundamental for us. So they created a task force. They worked, believe it or not, I know people, still in the military, and they said, we've never seen the Pentagon work so fast in our lives, just cranking up the pressure on them. They came back with a report to me. I was sitting in the Pentagon last week. I mean, Washington, D.C. can be frustrating, and there's times where you're like, are we really making a difference here? But I'm sitting in the Pentagon. I have the acting Secretary of Defense to my right, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to my left, all the service secretaries and chiefs down this side, the leaders, the members of the Sexual Assault Task Force on this side, and they were briefing me on what needs to change based on my directing them to do it to fix this issue, especially we were focused on when an assault is reported. We still got to address the front end to stop these from happening in the first place, and we're going to do that next. But I wanted to provide an alternative as we have a debate, probably again next week, as we mark up the defense bill. Don't strip commanders. Keep commanders accountable. Keep them responsible, but make sure that we have the best possible opportunity to find justice by all these other improvements. So I introduced legislation this week. It's got a lot of the recommendations from the task force, plus some others. I visited every military base in Arizona to listen to commanders, listen to the JAGs, listen to the investigators. What do they need? And there are some real common themes. We're going to criminalize sexual harassment for the first time ever in the USMCA as part of my legislation. And that's a good starting point. We're also going to make sure we have an innovative program in the military that when a victim comes forward and starts this process, the prosecutor represents the military, the defense attorney represents the accused, nobody represents the victim. They're basically a witness in the crime that intimately and deeply impacted them. So we have these things called Special Victims Counsels. They're only in the military, where the victim gets to have their own lawyer representing them through the process, but there's not enough of them. So we got to make sure that an SVC is available to every victim as soon as they say, I need one. And also the investigators, they don't have what they need right now for digital forensics. If they're trying to sort out, 85% of cases are not stranger cases, they're acquaintance cases. They're happening mostly in age 17 to 24. They're usually of a similar rank, E3 or E4, or maybe one higher. And a lot of the context of how this happens on our digital devices in our digital life. And that can help them strengthen a case and see how did this happen and what happened before and afterwards. But they don't have the capabilities right now. So we got to give them what they need for the digital forensics. Again, there's a lot of other elements in our bill. We hope to be including most of it in the defense bill next week, and this should be a bipartisan issue. I've got some partners in the House that are working on it as well, and I'm really proud to be leading this effort.
To answer the question you asked, you are making a difference, and thank you for your work.
Absolutely.